Hello, everyone. Welcome to the My Bitcoin Stories. We are, this podcast capture stories from people about their journey with Bitcoin. And today we got a special guest, Robert Breedlove. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, Robert Breedlove is the CEO and CIO of Parallax Digital. He's also a frequent guest for financial and Bitcoin media such as Real Vision, the Rich Dad Channel, the Keiser Report, the Investor Podcast Network, What Bitcoin Did, and Tales from the Crypt, and considered to be an important figure in the Bitcoin space through his writing and presenting the idea of separation of money and state. So, Robert, you have been featured in many shows and podcasts where you share your view about fiat money and money in general. And you have a lot of fascinating ideas, which is one of my favorites as well, like Master and Slave of Money, The Number of Zero, Money and Bitcoin, Money, Bitcoin, and Time series. So, a lot of people really admire you on the way for you think about Bitcoin. So, my question is how did you get to think like you do right now? Was it, what is the background? Was it from your parents, from your family, friends?
It's funny because how did you get to think the way you do? I I assume it's some combination of nature and nurture. But from as long as I can remember, I've been extremely curious. I've talked about this a little before, but when I first started reading a lot, it was actually driven by my curiosity about the universe. So I used to we had a trampoline, went camping a lot. I always found myself just staring up at the stars, wondering, oh, WTF, what's going on here? This is a lot. So as soon as I kind of picked up the habit of reading around the age of 10 or 11, like I could read well, I could pick up pretty much any book and figure it out. I went straight to the deep end of the pool, so to speak, and started reading a lot of astrophysics. That, I think, really made me think about things from a very first principle standpoint. Like you always want to understand the why that traces all the way back to the source of whatever it is. But it's funny. What comes to mind now too is actually if I look back a little further than that, when I'm 3, 4, 5 years old, my mom was very big on education. She just we had, certain challenges growing up, and she was always making the point that education was the key to get through any situation. So I remember there were times when we didn't even have paper, but we would have like paper grocery bags. So we would do math on paper grocery bags, and we'd do letters on the Etch-a-Sketch, which I don't know if people know what an Etch-a-Sketch is, but it's like a little plastic thing
that you can,
with knobs,
with the magnetic things.
So you could draw things and then erase it. And so I was fortunate to have that. I guess she really instilled that in me at a young age, just the importance of education and self-education, not just taking things at face value, but always asking, getting beneath things to figure out, I guess, the truth, get to as close to truth as you can. And then I was also very fortunate that this was a guy she worked with at the time. I don't even remember his name, to be honest, but he was actually teaching me, because I was very interested in math specifically. And he was teaching me, like I figured out addition and subtraction pretty easily. And then he was actually showing me multiplication and division. I couldn't understand it at the time. I'm 5 years old, but I remember it just left me with this fascination. I'm like, what? Like he showed me long division, and I was just like, my mind was blown. And I guess planted a seed just of, I don't know, curiosity, you would call it.
Curiosity, fascination in math.
Yeah, in math.
Then, going through deep down on the why things, right?
And then again, when you get into astrophysics, you see that these aren't the entire scientific body of astrophysics is largely not based on observation, right? Like Einstein figured out or hypothesized that black holes existed well before we observed a black hole. We still technically haven't observed a black hole. We've observed the gravitational influence it has on the stars around it. So we can say, oh, there it is. There's sort of this picture of a black hole that was recently released, but it's just, anyway, you can't really see it. So the point is, you're translating mathematical concepts into things that you can't even observe with your own senses, but you're proving that they really exist in the universe. So math is this incredible tool, right? It's a fiction in a sense that numbers aren't real. They're not anywhere you can touch, feel, or manipulate, but they're almost hyper real in that they can be used to categorize or group and manipulate our understanding of things, anything in the universe, right? You can use this language of mathematics. So yeah, that just took me down that rabbit hole, I guess. I'm not a mathematician I'm not formally trained in mathematics, but I just have a deep fascination with them, I would say, and their relationship between man and nature, the mathematical bridge between man and nature. I think I may have veered from the original question a little bit, but I guess all of this added to the way I think, and then getting into my teenage years, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew I wanted to be a businessman. No idea what that meant. I thought you're just carrying a briefcase and sending faxes and collecting a paycheck, something like that. Barely understood economics. Really didn't know what a stock. I just didn't know. So I started to kind of point my curiosity that direction. I started reading the Economist magazine. Became a very important publication for me. I read it religiously every week. I was probably starting around the age of, I guess, 16, 17, 18, going into college, and then in my young adult years, roughly. And similar thing, I couldn't understand a lot of it, but this is how we get smarter, by the way. Like if you're reading a book and you think it's above your comprehension level, but you're still interested, you're reading the right book, because it's like training.
You're curious about it.
Yeah, when you go to the gym, like you need to train to the edge of failure to adapt and grow.
Yeah.
So if you're just reading a book that's always in your comfort zone and you understand it completely, you're not going to grow from that book.
Yeah, true.
So that opened my eyes a lot. There are all these games being played worldwide to try and allocate scarce resources consistent with the general wants of humanity or the configuration of demand. So I was really thinking about that. And then I fell into, which they don't talk about in the Economist magazine at all. How did I discover this? I don't recall how I discovered it, but I eventually stumbled upon The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a
book about
the
Fed,
the inception of the Federal Reserve and all the evils of central banking, pretty much. And that was just, that was a whole nother rabbit hole, light bulb moment for me that, oh my gosh, all of this, economics in the world, it has a rotten core. It's not, we pay homage and testament to these free market principles that generate wealth and got us into modernity. But in fact, we have this rotten monopoly at the core of the whole system that steals from the whole system.
Values, yeah.
And that was a big impact on me. I ended up getting a book. It's pretty much an abridged version of The Creature from Jekyll Island called Dishonest Money, written by Joseph Plummer. So Creature from Jekyll Island, huge book, I don't know, 500 or 600 pages. This book was like maybe 100 pages and distilled the essence of it into a smaller book. I purchased maybe 10 or 20 copies and gave them to family and friends at Christmas. This is 2005 or 6, so I'm probably 20 years old, roughly. And a few friends and family actually read the book, and they get back to me, and they're like, hey, thanks, interesting.
But what they're going to do about it?
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And I always reflect back on that feeling, because it was like, I thought I had found the secret to saving the world, and that all I needed to do was go out and tell people about it, like I discovered it or something, and then it would just, things would be better.
Yeah.
But then quickly was snuffed out. So you can't even, your inner circle is like, okay, cool, but what can I do about it? I still need dollars. I still need a paycheck. I got bills to pay, kids to feed, whatever. And I was just like, oh, like left kind of hopeless feeling. I'm like, oh man, I guess the world is just corrupt and we don't have a choice. So swallowed that bitter pill and moved on with my life. I ended up getting a master's degree in accounting and finance and went on to be pretty much, I did some public accounting for a while. Then I was a career CFO, very focused in tech too. I had always been entrepreneurial my whole life, like largely online type businesses. I used to trade. It was actually, I joke that I was in digital assets before Bitcoin because I was trading in-game items on a game. It was a massive multiplayer online game called Diablo 2. I used to trade these assets in the little economies, and it got to the point because you could either play the game, you could go into the game and fight demons and dragons and whatever. Actually, not dragons, just demons and zombies. Or you could, and you equip your character with all these different items and give them different powers, and you can duel other characters. Or you can step out of that game and go into the trade networks, which are the markets, basically. So there were two games. So
what are they trading? Like just
trading items.
Items.
Yeah,
like
so swords for rings, for armors, for shields, for charm, like all these different little, it's just infinite complexity when you start combining all these different configurations. And there were real markets. There was a currency that emerged naturally. It's called the Stone of Jordan ring. They were called SOJs. So people would largely denominate their trades in SOJs. Like this shield for 13 SOJs, and you could take 40 SOJs and buy this bow. And it was a real market. And there were different markets too. You go into different channels to trade different things. And I, over time, started playing this game less, the actual game, Diablo, and started playing the trading game more. And was just learning, I guess, economics 101 in the trenches. I would just buy low and sell high. Wait till someone was overpaying for something, I'd sell it. Wait till something was being sold, buy it cheap. And I ended up becoming like wealthy in the game. So all my friends that played this too, I ended up being the guy they'd come to, like, hey, can I have the armor? And I was just like, whatever. And I had no idea. It taught me a couple things. One, I didn't know I was learning economics. I just figured it out on the fly. And two, I learned to type lightning fast because this is all done by type. So I'm typing like 90 words a minute by the end of my years playing this game. And so I guess that planted the seed that value doesn't need to exist just in tangible space.
True. Yeah.
There's a whole, I guess the thesis I took away from that, and as the world increasingly became more digitized in my early years and the emergence of the iPhone and things like this, I developed this thesis that the world is becoming a video game. So more and more of our relationships are mediated by screens. More and more of our wants are satisfied through software applications. Even if you look at like the Tesla today, if you've ever been in a Tesla car, it's like playing a video game. Basically, it's a giant screen. You can,
a lot of buttons.
And it, is that quote from, I forgot the name of the guy, but any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. So it's as if we're like it. I think we're in a renaissance now. Even today, I would say that the digital age is a renaissance. It's hard to see it up close. We think, oh, this is just cool. It's new tech, and we've had tech. Especially if you're young, it's hard to see it. But I'm just old enough to see. I remember rotary phones. When I was very young. Not many people had them still, but there were still some places. I remember the dial-up internet. All that. And I've lived long enough to see it come into what it is today, and I think this trajectory keeps going that way. So I decided that I wanted to point my career towards the convergence of commerce, trading, economics, and technology. And I guess the other piece would be like kind of the social business piece. I learned just through college in high school, there's all these social layers and enclaves to everything human. You know, we're social creatures. So something that combined those three elements. And then when I just, discovered Bitcoin, really, it took me, I found Bitcoin in 14, but I didn't go down the rabbit hole until 16. But ever since then, it's like, oh my gosh, this is everything I feel like my whole life has been leading me up to this point almost. So it's like I knew about digital assets, I knew about central banking, I see software's eating the world, and Bitcoin's like all of that wrapped into one.
Yeah.
And it's humanitarian, which is the other thing that's like the most powerful force behind it, is that it is the answer to that black monopolistic core that runs the world today. Bitcoin actually disrupts and remedies that pathological hierarchy that runs the world today. So it's almost like it's a Gutenberg-like, I would say I put Bitcoin in the bucket with internet and digital tech more generally. They're Gutenberg-like revolutions that are disrupting the dominant institution in the world. Where the Gutenberg printing press disrupted the church, we have the internet, Bitcoin, and equivalent technologies, you could say encryption generally, is disrupting the nation-state central bank monopoly on commerce. So people, Gutenberg printing press gave us free speech, the ability to mediate communications without interference. Now we have a way to intermediate energetic flow or value without interference. And I think it just unlocks the next level of civilization. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I guess I had a number of influences in my life, and I'll just thank my angelic mom for planting the seed to always be learning.
Yeah.
So
that's really beautiful.
Thanks.
And I mean, you touch a little bit about like how you read the book, like The Creature of Jekyll Island. And is this why you end up going down the what is money rabbit hole? Like, what is the story? Like, how was your relationship with money growing up, and then how you end up in this like rabbit hole, try to really find money itself?
Yeah, growing up, like I mentioned, early on in life, we were really well off. My mother and father were together, and then they separated and went to the opposite end of the spectrum. Things were really hard. So just scraping to get by a lot. So, and then when I started to learn about money, definitely the central bank rabbit hole teaches you quite a bit about what is money. The one thing I lacked there, though, that I didn't discover until Bitcoin, was the Austrian economics rabbit hole. Scarcely touched on it. I think I read a little bit of Rothbard, but I didn't know about Mises and Hayek and all of this. So I knew enough. I guess the bottom of my thinking in the central banking rabbit hole was that gold is money, but I didn't get beneath that enough, to understand the monetary properties and how money changes and emerges different times in different places based on these properties. So, I guess what got me into. So I think getting into Bitcoin got me into Austrian economics, which is one piece to Bitcoin, by the way. Bitcoin's a multidisciplinary understanding. You need to know physics and computer science and thermodynamics and game theory and economics.
Computer science.
It touches everything, right? And I found that I had, I'm the type of person that I'll sit there and read and put in the hours, I'll just imbibe all the information I can to really get to the bottom of something and understand it. But then when I try and take those learnings and articulate them to someone else, it's a lot. Like, how can you compress
all of the information?
Yeah. If anyone that's been down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it's like you're in there for a few hundred hours before you really get it. Whatever. Some people have gotten it more quickly than others. It took me a couple of 100 hours of flat out speed reading and rereading to really understand what's going on here. Hard to turn around and shoot that into someone's ear in 30 minutes, And I guess just thinking deeply about this entire topic, I decided that well, the real trick here is just getting someone to really think about what is money. Like I don't need to tell you anything. First of all, you're going to be resistant to whatever I tell you. Like we're all skeptical. What's his agenda? He probably owns Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And as anyone outside of Bitcoin will tell you, we sound like a bunch of rabid maniacs talking about how this thing's eating the world and changing. You're not going to use dollars anymore. And people are like, okay, bro, like take it easy. So I thought that maybe a softer approach, which is more like, have you seen the movie Inception? It's like incepting the idea.
Yeah, then let it grow itself.
Yeah, let them, if they ask themselves the question earnestly and persistently, I don't see how that road doesn't lead to Bitcoin at some point. Because if you keep asking that question, honestly, and you really pursue it, you're going to find Austrian economics. You're going to find the first principles of money. You're going to look at Bitcoin through the lens of first principles, compare it to everything else, and see that it's orders of magnitude better. So that, to me, was like, okay, this is, and no one had done that yet. No one had really laser focused on that question to really try and garner it the attention that it deserves. So yeah, that's what I decided to name the YouTube channel and podcast that. The aim is going to be to talk to the brightest minds in the world about that topic, but it's not just economics and money, because the deeper you get into money, you realize it touches everything. Like it's I argue that it's an extension of our minds, actually. Like when we make economic decision, we're thinking in dollars or thinking in the local currency. It's like language. It's like a software implementation almost. And which also makes it really hard to think about, because you have to be, it's meta thinking. You're thinking about your own thinking, you know? You have to look at what is looking. You have to observe the observer. It's tricky.
Because everything is automatic. Like you do it like automatically.
Yeah, exactly. But if you develop that level of thinking, all of a sudden you're free. You're meta. You can apply this meta thought to other constructs. And so that's it. I hope that people will take it seriously. You know, I hope, by the way, I'm already learning a lot from it. I've only had one guest. I had Sailor. But holy cow.
Yeah.
I mean, the connection between money and energy, and money being meta energy, as in the highest form of energy human beings can channel across space and time. And the entire purpose of human life, the reason we're dominant in the world, is because we channel energy across space and time more intelligently and with more purpose than any other animal. I mean, my mind still, I've watched them 3 times, editing them and doing them. My mind is still blown just from guess one. And I know how many answers there are to that question, what is money? And how many sides of life it touches. So I'm really excited. It's, for me, like a passion project to just satisfy my own intellectual curiosity. But then I think it's also something worthwhile to share with the world, in that, again, back to the Gutenberg-like revolution. Another thing that happened when the Gutenberg revolution took place, there were 10 million books produced in the decade that it was invented. Prior to that decade, there were 10 million books approximately produced in 500 years prior. So the amount of books exploded. The cost of information access imploded. The result of that was people had more access to information. There were more thinkers. There was a more variety of thinking. There was higher quality thought, more heretical thought at the time, because they were questioning the church, right? More critical thinking. And on average, populations became more intelligent. So I think the digital renaissance, at least one aspect of it, is that we've collapsed, again, the cost of information access, and we're going to see a commensurate boom in general intelligence. And that's what I intend to be at the forefront of. I want people that become swept up in this renaissance via Bitcoin or whatever other means. I want them to look to, my show and my guest is a real valuable resource to that end. Yeah, I hope I could just get people asking the question, what is money? Because I think that accelerates Bitcoin. So
that's true. Like that's question, what is money, is like the center of like you know, at least Bitcoin, and then like how we see everything in this world right now,
Yeah.
you know, like why stuff is not happening as it should be, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we can go to your Bitcoin story. So, I mean, how, like, when did you first hear about Bitcoin? How you get your hand into Bitcoin? And I mean, you just buy it, you trade it, or like, how was it? How was the story? How was the journey until you're like, oh yeah, this is it?
Yeah. You know, the funny thing about it is that I don't know that I can pinpoint the exact first moment that I heard about it. I feel like I heard about it a couple of times before I was really like, okay, I'm going to go check this thing out. The one time that I remember, I was living in Las Vegas at the time. This is probably 2014, 13, 14, I guess. And I was visiting one of my friends at his office, and his IT guy, they were talking about it. I don't, like, maybe this was right when Bitcoin did its big run up to 1150 in late 13. Maybe this was during or immediately after that, possibly around that time frame. And they were just like, oh, whatever. And then the IT guy's like, it's bullshit. And just, but that was like, oh, I'm going to go see what, like, there's computer money now. What's going on? That's the first time I remember hearing about it. But I felt like I'd heard about it. Like, it seems to me like it was one of those things where you don't really think about something till you hear it like the third or fourth time.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the third or fourth time, but it's the only one I can really explicitly recall. And then I think I read just articles about it, but nothing meaningful, you know, maybe like even The Economist, you know, again, this magazine that I like was disparaging it. And I guess all of that influenced me a little bit, but I decided I'd buy a little, speculate, and then it went up in price and I sold a little bit. And then I kind of stopped thinking about it pretty much. Thought I was a genius, made some money, moved on. But then in 2016, it was actually Ethereum. So they were running, you know, which is an alternative crypto asset, but they had a pretty major marketing campaign, I guess, that they're trying to be this smart contract platform of the future. And it's super slick imagery. Like, it's very cool marketing. You're like, all right, what is this? And I zeroed in on smart contracts and started studying those deeply. That gave me like something to grab onto. Whereas Bitcoin is just trickier because I guess I was just reading the wrong sources, but smart contracts was something very specific. It's not like there were economist articles saying, oh, smart contracts will never work. It's like it was unheard of basically in the general. So when you research smart contracts, you were automatically a little bit deep. Yeah. And when I got to Nick Szabo's work, and Nick Szabo had written a piece on smart contracts in the 90s, maybe earlier, late 90s, I was like, the finance industry is a smart contract. Like, I was like, holy cow, this is the thing. Where you have human-enabled smart contract that's this intermediary business model that we call the finance industry today, that's truthfully just matching buyers and sellers. That entire function should be eaten by software because it's dry code, right? Yeah. I wouldn't say all of it, but the vast majority of it. You're just matching capital and ideas, buyers and sellers, et cetera, and taking a skim. Yeah. But that skim should be able to be collapsed if it's facilitated by software instead of people, right? You just do it much more cheaply.
Just like also reduce the number of resources and all this thing.
Yeah, just orders of magnitude more efficiently to do commerce via computer than calling your broker that calls his broker that calls the guy that calls the guy, you know. And that's by the way, that's how bonds are still sold today, right? Government bonds are still sold like this. So that was my boom. My light bulb moment was like, this wave of innovation, smart contracts, which are only possible with crypto assets, are the thing. I need to buy a bunch of this and figure it out. So I started investing heavily and started out diversified. So I was on Coinbase. I'm like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, I think were the three that they offered at the time. So bought a bunch of that and then kept studying. And then really started to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, right? Started to find, again, more of Szabo. There was a podcast with Szabo and Naval on Tim Ferriss that was really good. I think a lot of people have listened to. But they were still not Bitcoin focused. They're kind of like,
like crypto, very IT.
Well, cryptocurrency, you know. But then you get into the Pierre Rochard and the VJ and the Safedine, and then actually reading Safedine's book. So I'm going down that whole rabbit hole, becoming more and more focused on Bitcoin. Like, oh, wow, Bitcoin is the thing here. These other things are good in theory, perhaps, but Bitcoin could disrupt gold. Gold is the base layer of geopolitical sovereignty in the world. So there's a reason central banks hold all the gold, so they can make all the rules. And now Bitcoin is this digital disruptor that's pulling the rug out from under them. Like, that is the whole game, by the way. And that, it's easy to say, oh, it's digital gold or it's disrupting gold. People are like, well, I don't use gold anyways, so why should I care about that? But you have to get this broader perspective that gold is the game being played today.
Yeah.
The armies in the world are funded by the gold holdings of the governments that control gold. Yeah. When governments go to war with one another, if one conquers another, the first place they go is to their central bank to steal all of their gold. It still is the dominant money in the world, frankly. Like, we, the peons, are forced to transact in these uncollateralized government debt certificates we call fiat currency.
Yeah, but the government.
But the money is gold. Gold is money, basically, still today. And even if you're a law-abiding citizen and you don't know anything about this, and you don't own gold, and you don't own Bitcoin, and you're just walking across the street to go to your cubicle office job, the laws you're abiding by, the private property rights, contract law, the courts, the police, the legal system, all the sovereignty of all this authority is rooted in the gold holdings of the central bank. So it's all of our socioeconomic systems are a derivative of gold, even though we don't understand it. Doesn't matter if you understand it or not. You're playing that game. Yeah. You're living in this game. You're part of someone else's story, even. And through that lens is why Bitcoin's such a big deal, because Bitcoin is the first competing sovereignty system in the history of the world. So, like, a new game to play. And it's superior. Like, the reasons gold was selected on the free market, Bitcoin is exponentially better in every way. And I always hit on the 5 properties of money. I guess I should say them: divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, scarcity. That's why gold was selected. Bitcoin has perfected all those monetary properties, essentially. And it just, the future looks as though it will be constructed in an entirely new way as a result. You could think about this as, humanity, gold is like the base level operating system. So like the Linux, I guess, of civilization. And now we have this super Linux, essentially, that's been erected. And the higher layers that are built up around it are completely different as a result. So I became much more narrowly focused on Bitcoin, and it just gave me an impetus to start writing. You know, I've been reading my whole life. I'd written a little bit here and there, but nothing specific. But we'd started a business. So this whole time I'm running a fund as well. So my portfolio construction is becoming more reflective of my thesis over time. So initially we're diversified, we become more and more focused on Bitcoin. And then this is during the Bitcoin bear market. So I'm playing psychologist with a lot of my investors, like, it's okay, here's what Bitcoin is, da, da, da. And that was kind of the impetus to really start writing. It's like, okay, I need to sharpen my own conviction and make sure I really know what I'm talking about here. Money's on the line, other people's money's on the line. I have to really dig into this.
That must be really tough, during the bear market.
Oh man, brutal. And that's actually, I got this tattoo at the bottom of the bear market. It's November 2018. It's my only tattoo. I was 33, I guess, when I got it. And it was that process. It's like studying Bitcoin so deeply, writing about it, talking about it, had this moment where I'm like, I'm going to commit my life to this thing, essentially. And so reading a lot of Taleb's books at the time, like Skin in the Game and Anti-Fragile. So I decided, all right, I'm going to have skin in the game for real and actually get a tattoo. So yeah, maybe I veered from the original question again, but that was my path into Bitcoin. And now I consider it to be my life's work.
Yeah.
You know, the other joke I like to make is we all end up on Bitcoin's payroll eventually. So I guess I just decided to jump in earlier than the rest of the world.
That's really smart. Yeah. I mean, I made a tweet the other day, like, you know, I go to work to collect sats, and then once we got paid by sats, we don't have to go to work. Like,
Yeah.
kind of like that.
Yeah. It's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. And so you also, like, you know, like, I read a lot of your articles, and I really love, you know, how you put everything. So where do you get that inspiration from? Like, I mean, like, you read a lot of books, you hear a lot of podcasts probably, but like, where do you get that inspiration from writing those things? Or just like always in your mind and just like,
I don't really know. I think there's definitely a domain beyond knowledge, beyond space and time even, that we're connected to, and that's where you know, things like spirituality come into play. But it's not just, you know, all spirituality. There's also, if you study Austrian economics, even this study of praxeology, which is how people treat objects as means and ends to accelerate themselves towards the achievement of goals being largely targeted at the reduction of uneasiness or alleviation of anxiety. There's a subjective side of existence, but value is whatever we want to help us accelerate towards our goal. And all of our goals and valuations are inherently subjective. So there's something, I can't just point to like the objective source of inspiration. There's this other subjective domain and they blend together really interestingly. I'll say that I think when we read, we're tapping into, if you want to use the word spirit, of these other thinkers who themselves were tapped into the spirits of other thinkers that came before them. Another way to say this more in a more secular fashion is that we're all just filters of information. You know, they've been passing not just thinking and verbally, but your genes, by the way.
Ancestor.
Well, your genes are immortal informational organisms, and your current body is just a vehicle for them.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to be passed on to your kids. They don't really change form.
Yeah.
The vehicle changes form, but the genes do not.
Yeah. Very
little. So we are these echo chambers of information in a way. And so I think a lot of it comes from that you're channeling the spirit or the information of those that have come before you. We're standing on the proverbial shoulders of giants, right? And then I think there's something too, like, I got into yoga and meditation in my early 20s. And like, meditation is something else. I'm still wrestling with my life all the time to get a regular practice all the time. I think it's really hard to maintain, and I want to do better about prioritizing it. But I've had good runs in life where I've like meditated daily for a good chunk of time, you know, several months, maybe even at least regularly for years at a time. And I also practice yoga a lot, very regularly, which is kind of a moving meditation. That gets you tapped into something else. So I don't know where it comes from, but
it's always there.
Yeah, if you want to open your mind and see the seer, you know, again, getting meta, get outside yourself and be able to look down on things from a different perspective. Exercise, meditation, breath work.
Yeah. Funny enough, because like 2 weeks ago, I attended this tantric event in Ubud. And then, like, you know, we are talking a lot about energy, like masculine and feminine energy, and how masculine is all about, you know, logic and math and, you know, action. Whereas like feminine energy is about expanding, riding the chaos. And it's like a more like decentralized kind of work, because like how women always see, like, you know, in different side. And then throughout this event, which is like, it's like a tantric event, but I'm just like, in my head, I get download of Bitcoin and how like, oh my God, like Bitcoin is like
Yeah.
having not only just like masculine energy but also feminine energy, how like it can ride throughout chaos, and how
Yeah.
like all of these deities that's being represented in female energy is actually being manifested in
Yeah.
Bitcoin,
Yeah.
which is really cool. So I think like, you know, even during the meditation, you can also get that download about
Yes.
monies and Bitcoin and all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, that's the right way to put it, is a download from wherever.
Whatever.
Yeah. But no, that's a great point. In Bitcoin, infinitely interesting because it is this union of opposites in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
where you're talking about masculine and feminine energy, or order and chaos.
Yeah.
You know, which capitalism and socialism, by the way, like capitalism, I would say, is much more masculine, logical. Socialism is like, well, can't everyone just, you know, get along, and we'll give it. And socialism is great at a local level, like your family.
Yeah.
You're very socialist with your family. You'll just give them whatever you want, but it doesn't scale, right?
Yeah.
So we need capitalism at the highest levels, but socialism at the lowest levels. And then Bitcoin is like this public utility, right? It's available to everyone.
Yeah.
But it facilitates trade flows of private property.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
privacy.
And privacy. And so it's like bridged the gap between capitalism and communism,
Yeah.
which was the ideological struggle of the 20th century. The mining algorithm itself is deeply immersed in entropy and chaos, right? It's the numbers are quite literally trying to find a single atom in the entire universe. Is when the miners are casting votes, they're casting these hashes as votes. They're trying to find the real needle in a haystack, the needle in the cosmic haystack. And from that resolution of chaos comes the most indisputable order the world's ever had. You cannot argue with the Bitcoin blockchain. It's the only source of truth in the world. So all these things are just like, that's the pathway into the rabbit hole.
All right. So, so how, like, you know, what do you think your biggest lesson about money and Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin has changed your life?
Yeah. I think it's funny. As a kid growing up, I had a lot of insecurities, actually. I was just made fun of for different reasons. So I had like insecurities about myself. And I think I overcompensated in a way, just by trying to be at the best I could be in all these different ways. And then I almost maybe swung the pendulum too far in the other direction. Because I had a lot of success early in my career, and I just thought, you know, it's like we take feedback from the market. So you try something, and then you succeed, and you're like, oh, okay, I figured that out. Let me try something else. And you succeed, like, oh, I figured that out too. And at some point you lose humility a little bit. I think my biggest failing in life thus far has been this. I think I was arrogant for a while. Everything that I tried, I was doing well. Nothing was perfect. I had a lot of challenges along the way, but more or less everything came out net positive. And Bitcoin, and I think this does it to everyone, Bitcoin humbled me a lot when I trying to develop a trading strategy to outperform Bitcoin and having some success, but then getting crushed in the other direction.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about the use of leverage, the ineradicable truth that markets are inherently unknowable. So your model may work for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but then that's reinforcing your confidence in the model. But if you put your money in the confidence in that model, the model is going to break down at some point. So you can have a streak of wins a mile long. But if your last decision is wrong, you can wipe it all out. So I just think that Bitcoin has taught me humility at a very deep level. And I now pray for it every day, because since then, like since learning hard lessons, things have been going well again. Things are going, but I'm always like, thank you for what's happening. That's good. But please let me stay grounded and ritualized in the world and know that this can all, none of this is promised, you know,
Yeah.
it can go the other direction just as easily. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very, I think that's like sum up like all the experience of people that, you know, trading Bitcoin. People thinks that, oh yeah, I know this thing.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah. And I talk to people now that are sometimes in a similar boat to where I was a few years ago, and they're like, all I've tasted are wins. You know, like I've been betting on Bitcoin, I'll buy it, it goes up, and they're doing other trades, like they're buying call options on Tesla or whatever, making money. And they're like, maybe you think I should like leverage up and just double down on this option strategy, or leverage up and buy more Bitcoin? And I'm like, look, here's the deal. It can amplify your gains, but it can also lead to ruinous losses. So you just have to, you got to be humble. And it sounds maybe cliche to some people. They're like, oh yeah, everyone says that. You got to say, it was like, no, you need to stay humble or you're going to get hurt. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah. Oh, and in your podcast, you also mention frequently about sovereign individual, and I saw there's that book in there. So which come first to you, Bitcoin or sovereign individual?
Well, I think I had that libertarian seed planted with the central banking rabbit hole. You know, just came to see it as a system for controlling people. And I've always had a healthy disregard for authority. I've labeled myself a freedom maximalist. I think in more classic times, we would just say, you know, free market capitalist or libertarian before the word was, all these words have been bastardized in the modern age. So I think freedom maximalist captures it pretty inarguably. It's like, no, you just want more freedom, not just for yourself, but for everyone. So liberalism, freedom maximalism came first for me. But through Bitcoin, I actually discovered that book, The Sovereign Individual, which is, I recommend it on, I think, every media show that I do. One of the most important books you can ever read. Not an especially enjoyable read. I'm not recommending it because it's the height of literary creativity. You know, it's kind of dense and it's like reads like a textbook sometimes. But for me, it's the best map I have discovered of the world we're moving into, this transition from the industrial age to the digital age, what they call the information age. I think digital sounds better, so I go with digital. But the thesis of the book, like the maxim that's credited to Andreessen Horowitz, that software is eating the world. That includes government. Software is going to eat government as well. And book was written in 97. They predicted the emergence of Bitcoin, essentially. They called it anonymous cyber cash. And they said that once this breakthrough occurred, that when people had an option to store capital in encrypted money, that everyone would do so, because you could basically unilaterally escape inflation, taxation, capital controls, and you can put it in a money that can't be stolen, can't be inflated, can't be taxed. So it becomes this entirely new domain that the economic incentives will force people there. As governments become more overreaching, as we're seeing in the world today, people will be forced to defend and shelter their capital by any means necessary. And there is no more unassailable territory than digital. Like if you put your wealth in Bitcoin and you've custodied it properly, you're good. You can do anything. You can go anywhere in the world, do anything you want. That has the second order effect of collapsing the revenue model of the nation state, which is solely based on taxation and inflation. So the book explores what happens next. When government revenues gradually then suddenly go to zero, how does the world organize itself? And we have no historic parallel. We have a couple, again, like I referred to the Gutenberg thing earlier. They're like we saw the collapse of the USSR when they kind of bankrupted. We saw what happened there. So there are some case studies that we can apply to this. That the book does a
But we
great
never
job,
know.
but we have no idea,
Yeah.
right? We have no idea. And I'm actually writing an essay series on the book right now that it'll be a 12-part series that goes, I think there's 11 chapters in the book. So I have one extra, pretty much each part in the series covers a chapter in the book, but I have one extra focus on Bitcoin specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I hope to unpack some of those ideas. And yeah, again, the book's not the most fun thing to read, so I'm trying to put my own voice to it and add some of my own commentary and perspectives on it, and hopefully make it a little more stylish, or palatable for readers, I guess. But yeah, I'm really excited about that.
So this is the book that you are going to write?
Well, this is just an essay series.
This is an essay
So I'm
series.
just going to be publishing it. I'll publish part 1 Monday, I think. And then, 12 parts, I'll release them throughout the rest of the year.
Okay.
It may be, some of that may be a component of my book as well, but it's not intended for that right now.
So tell us more about the book that you're
about
to release. What is it? What's you going to cover there?
Yeah, well, I'll say a couple things about the book. One, the tentative title is Time, Money, Soul. I've got a Patreon group set up for it. I think I've got 150 paid members right now. We have a private Telegram chat, so we're always talking. They help edit my this blog series. They're helping me edit it. So I don't want it to just be from my head. I'm actually trying to participate with the market. So when I put these things out for draft, I get great feedback. People are like, this doesn't make sense, or have you thought about this, or what about these ideas? And I can start to incorporate all this feedback. But that book, so here's the premise. Here's the other thing. It's pretty ambitious. So I don't know if I'm going to get it all into this first book that I'd like to publish by the end of the year. I've got a ton of notes right now that are kind of messy and disorganized. And I've got a framework for the book, basically a table of contents. And I'm trying to synthesize the two. I don't know that I'm going to get all of those ideas into the first book. And I don't know if the first book will be by that title. I think this Time, Money, Soul might be my bigger book that takes a little bit longer to write. The book that's coming out towards the end of the year, so whatever, it may have that title, may not. I haven't figured that out yet. I'll give you the general arc that I want to try and cover. I hope in this book, but maybe in multiple. So the universe is made of space and time. Space and time started with a big bang, right? So I'll kind of run through that. First principles, astrophysics. How did we get to today? Life emerges. The main impulse of life is the territorial imperative, I think, my hypothesis. And that means it wants to expand its dominion over space and time. So not only does it want to take as much physical territory as possible, but it also wants to expand its dominion over time, which means it wants to have as much offspring as possible. So life is trying to grow into space and time as much as possible, harness energy to spread itself through space and time. That territorial imperative in man is expressed in property rights. Property rights are our claim on space and time and energy, right? Energy, which helps us gain more territory. The most important private property right in any economy is money. So I'm trying to draw this connection between astrophysics to biological reality to economic reality. So hopefully really rooting money in the first principle, right?
Yeah.
And then through that lens, explain central banking. Why is it structured the way it is? I would argue that it is the territorial imperative of a few trying to benefit at the expense of the territorial imperative of the many. Right? They want essentially a vehicle for perpetually siphoning value from the productive economy. We'll also, which we'll get into why gold was chosen as money, why central banking corrupted it, how Bitcoin is better and disrupts the central bank by disrupting gold. And then hopefully get into the other piece of that is like game theory, right? So game theory is a biological thing. It's not just human. Game theory is exhibited by a number of creatures. So we'll explain money and trade through game theory. And then post Bitcoin, what does the world look like? Just some ideas, like glimmers of what does it look like if we...
Yeah, what is it? What do you think after, like...
Cost of living, the main thing is cost of living would just collapse because an unhampered market economy, we've generated this much wealth with an extremely hampered market economy, an increasingly hampered market economy, actually. How much wealth could we generate and how much innovation and breakthroughs could we achieve if we stripped out all these barriers to free trade? And free trade is the generative source of all of our good ideas, all of the modern luxuries we enjoy every day, we take for granted, it propels us into a new level of wealth and civilization, frankly. And who knows, like what kind of breakthroughs lie on the other side of that? I have no freaking idea. But you could maybe just game it out a little bit. It's like, what does, sort of like the sovereign individual does, like what does society look like post nation state, post scarcity? When I say scarcity, I mean like people working to survive, when you could instead just work a few hours a week,
survivability
to meet your basic needs. Instead of working 40 hours a week to eat and have shelter, maybe you're working 4 hours a week to eat and have shelter. What do you do with the other 36 hours? I think human creativity, artistry, ingenuity, all these things start to flourish. Culture flourishes. So yeah, that kind of gets into the soul. If it is time, money, soul, that'd be kind of the soul aspect of the book. But just getting out of our own way by fixing the money. So, yeah.
Wow, like looking forward to read that.
Well, it's so freaking ambitious. I don't know. I don't even know if I can write it, but I'm going to do my best.
Well, obviously from like sharing and your knowledge, we all got, the taste of it.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Hope the main dish is worth it.
So maybe the last question is like, what kind of advice or things that you can tell to people who just start, getting into the rabbit hole of Bitcoin or like holding their Bitcoin, especially right now we are in the third halving. So like, maybe you can give a little bit of that.
Yeah. I think it's actually relatively straightforward, and over complexifying it is what will get you into trouble. So I think what I'm going to lay out here sounds too simple, maybe, and we have this bias towards action or towards doing more than is necessary in a way, and that's why holding or hodling is so hard actually on a lot of people, because like, what do you mean you just buy and hold? I want to trade it. I want to buy low and sell high. It's like, okay, you're free to try that, but 99.9% of humans fail miserably doing that. You might be the 0.1, maybe it's 1%. You might be the 1% that trades successfully. Most do not.
Yeah.
So you can walk that path if you want. But the first rule is just educating yourself. Just study. I mean, read the work of all these great writers. There's so much good content in the Bitcoin space now, and you can get very high signal to noise ratio if you follow the right people, which this is why I think Twitter is such a great tool. If you zero in on Bitcoin, this is where a lot of people get lost, because Bitcoin sounds great, but then you immediately get distracted by shitcoins.
Yeah.
But if you could just take this one piece of advice, like just focus on Bitcoin at first, okay? If you just trust me on that one until you get your feet wet, then if you decide you still want to learn about shitcoins, which I don't think you will once you really get Bitcoin, then you could do that. But just narrow your focus to Bitcoin initially. Learn about it. Focus on learning about it. Specifically on authors that are referencing the Austrian economic dimensions of money. Mm. And I'm not this, I guess a little background on Austrian econ is necessary. I'm not some crazy guy that's attached to dogmatically to Austrian economics. Mm. What we have in the world is Keynesian economics, Austrian economics. Austrian economics is the collective sum total of all the world's knowledge about economics across all time. Basically just compressed into the Austrian school. So all the greatest thinkers, ancient wisdom, compressed all the way up to modern knowledge is Austrian economics. Mm. Keynesian economics is 200-year-old banker propaganda, basically, that justifies the printing of money. Mm-hmm. So they say that we need to print more money to make people want more stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if you just look at it intuitively for 1 second, you're like, wait a minute, people always want stuff. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants more material. You don't need to print money to make me go buy stuff. Like, I'm always going to want the stuff. It's a matter of allocating scarce resources to create the stuff. Mm-hmm. So really focus on Bitcoin, preferably through an Austrian economics lens. Learn. When you decide to buy Bitcoin, because you will if you actually do that. I don't know anyone that's studied it deeply and doesn't buy Bitcoin, which also diffuses the other argument where people will argue with on Twitter, like, well, you're just saying that because you own Bitcoin. It's like, how can you understand Bitcoin and not own Bitcoin? Like, it's not possible. Of course I own Bitcoin. Do you? So whatever. That's a bit of a circular thing. When you decide to buy Bitcoin, I lay out a very simple strategy for people I think they should follow. It's just look at your portfolio. Say it's $1 million portfolio. Mm-hmm. Say you've decided you want 20% allocation to Bitcoin in total. I would advocate market buying in an initial position, which would be maybe 10%. Mm-hmm. So maybe you do a $100,000 market buy of Bitcoin, and then average in the last 100,000 over time. So your dollar cost averaging in. And then that gives you, because Bitcoin's so volatile, no one knows what it's going to do in the short run. You can opportunistically buy dips. Mm-hmm. So this will let you increase your portfolio allocation while decreasing your cost basis. So you get a little bit of opportunism coupled with some immediate exposure. And then as far as the timing of that, like, do you market by 15% or 5%? And this gets a little more nuanced, but just look at the halving cycle. Like right now, we are
the third.
we're 8 months post-halving. Mm. New Bitcoin all-time highs are typically 12 to 18 months post-halving. Mm. So if I was going to be taking exposure today, and for all indications are that the price still maps onto the halving cycle pretty closely, I would be market buying a larger percentage of that 20% and averaging in a smaller percentage. Mm-hmm. Versus if we just had a blow off top and I'm buying there, I'd be market buying a much smaller position and averaging in over an expected bear market. Mm. All that said, that's very loosey-goosey because you're assuming a lot of things. But below that is the more general strategy is just continuously accumulate Bitcoin. It is your savings account. Mm-hmm. It is the only money in history that cannot be inflated or stolen. And accumulate as much as possible forever and never sell. I mean, you could, by all means, if you find something that you decide is more valuable for you, your dream home or wedding or whatever the thing is, by all means, sell your Bitcoin and go get it. But until you find that thing, or until Bitcoin has grown so much that there's just less upside to it, I think it's the best asset you can own in the world for storing value across even 100 years. And I think by interacting with Bitcoin too, when you own money that appreciates year over year, you're disincentivized from buying stuff. You're like, well, why buy the TV this year if it's going to be 25% cheaper for me next year? So it lowers your time preference, lowers your consumption habits. And then finally, self-custody. Do not leave Bitcoin on an exchange or with a counterparty, because it's the only digital bearer money there is. So if you leave it with a counterparty and the counterparty defaults, then you're wiped out on your Bitcoin. So take custody of your Bitcoin, learn how to do that. Multi-signature is best. It's a little bit more complicated. You can pay for services to have help you set it up, but that gives you the self-sovereignty to control your money, but also gives you redundancy. So if you lose one key, you haven't lost them all. Right? So because there's no Bitcoin headquarters to call and get your key back. There's no reversing a transaction. It's with great power comes great responsibility. So a lot of learning, following a pretty simple accumulation strategy, and then holding it yourself.
Yeah. That's wrap up the, this really nice discussion, and then going through your stories and your, your background, and then all the Bitcoin, stuff also. So thank you so much, Robert, for the time for us to do this podcast. And your podcast the series is What is Money? Also, like in
the What is Money show.
What is Money show in Spotify and also in YouTube. So please check that out. And thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. See you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.